Okay, hi Year 7. Here's an English video for today. Now we're up to number 4. We've talked about, we are talking about these 4 things when we're talking about film. I've done a video on camera work, I've done a video on sound, I've done a video on mise-en-scène, and I'm doing today's video on editing. If you haven't watched the first 3, I suggest you go back and watch those first, because there'll be lots of useful information there for you before you listen to today's video on editing. Okay, so editing is what happens after all the parts of the film have been recorded and filmed, and it's what happens when they're putting the film together. Okay, so in a modern film production, there will be a whole team of people that works on the editing of the film. Now, back in the olden days, film was actually shot on big rolls of film, great big rolls of film, almost the size of bicycle wheels. And what they had to do is they literally had to use scissors or something to cut up the film and to stitch the film together, so they could take out the bits that they didn't want and put together all the bits they did want to make the film. And that's why we have language in the world of film like cut and cutting the film together, because it actually did mean cutting once upon a time. Now, of course, it's all digitally recorded these days and has been for a long time, but the same basic principles apply, I suppose. Now, I heard once that when they're making a film that might go for about 2 to 2.5 hours, they probably shoot like 50 or 100 hours worth of footage. And what they do is they pick the best bits out and they use that to tell the story of the film. So they use only a small amount of the footage that they actually shoot in the first place, and so a lot of it is wastage. So the first thing they've got to do is they've got to get the sequencing together. Okay, they've got to get all the bits together so it tells the story in the right order. And the way that a story is told in a film can be quite complicated. Okay, very rarely is it just following the story of one person in an exact chronological order. For example, something that often happens in film is that it'll sort of tell 2 different stories at once, 2 stories that are happening to different people in different places. And the film will alternate between looking at the first story and the second story, okay? And sometimes, well, what I call this, it's like parallel editing. So because of parallel lines, it's like 2 lines that are together side by side. So a parallel editing sort of tells 2 different stories at once. So that's one thing that they might do when they're editing the film together to tell the final story. Another thing that happens is, well, how they cut the film together depends on what sort of film it is. If it's a high-paced action film with lots of crazy stuff going on, it probably cuts from shot to shot really rapidly. Okay, you see something, then you see something else, then you see something else, then you see something else. Whereas if it's more of a sad, romantic, emotional film, then it might have a gentler pace. And so you see the same thing on the screen for maybe 20 seconds instead of like 3 seconds that you would in an action movie. So they sort of, in an action film, they usually chop a lot of things together in a very rapid pace, so that when you watch it, it has this sense of really rapid, chaotic action. But not all films would be like that as well. Okay, another thing they've got to take care of is continuity, because and we probably know what continuity errors are in a film. It's when something shouldn't be the way it is because they've made a mistake when they filmed it. So, for example, let's say, this is just a simple example. Let's say that there's a scene taking place, and it just takes place in someone's kitchen, and there's a bottle of lemonade on the kitchen bench, and the 2 people are talking. And then the shot comes back to that, and then the bottle of lemonade has disappeared. Now, this could happen because those 2 scenes were actually shot on different days, and someone moved the bottle of lemonade in between. But when they're editing the film together, what they've got to do is make sure that those continuity errors aren't there, so it looks like a natural scene, okay, even though it might have been shot on different days, because it takes a long time to shoot a film. Probably it takes months to shoot a film. They've also got to make sure that the vision and sound make sense together, okay, so that the soundtrack is on at the right time compared to the images on the screen, okay, and they've got to tidy everything up so that you've probably seen some movies sometimes where the sound and the vision are not synchronized together, and it's really annoying to watch. So part of the editing process is making sure that the sound and the vision are synchronized as well. Okay, then you've got things like sound effects and special effects, which are much more prominent in modern movies than in older movies. So those things are part of editing and part of what's called post-production. So they're often put in after all the filming is done. And more modern films, the things that are in the film are never actually filmed in the first place. So I was watching a film the other day, and it took place in this really large, luxurious house, and you often saw the outside of the house in the film. But it turns out that the whole outside of the house was just computer generated. It was never actually there. And so a lot of editing and post-production these days is doing complicated like graphical rendering, okay, to make a film look authentic, even though it might not actually have been something that was actually filmed with a camera in the first place. Okay, so that covers a bunch of stuff that's in editing. I'm also going to put a web link up on the Google Classroom as well, which actually shows some of these things with good examples from YouTube clips and that sort of thing. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to make in your books dot points, 5 dot points covering covering the editing section, okay, of film study, okay. If you haven't looked at it yet, the last revision video is over on maths, and your maths quiz will be going up today sometime. Okay, have a good day. Bye bye.